Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. So we have Sylvia To, manager who is in head of Bullish Insights on the show today. And Sylvia, nice stopping by. Thank you
Thanks.
for coming.
So,
Yeah. And Sylvia, basically today we're just going to discuss the Bullish Web3 report. I think it's officially called the Web3 Festival Hong Kong report,
yeah.
which is basically Bullish's insights on the Web3 festival that happened here in Hong Kong from April 12th to 15. It's a conference report, 42 pages. And this is, I kind of like this format, one, because I didn't actually go to the conference, so it's a good way to kind of get a summary. But also, what I liked about the report was the fact that it was a distillation, and I think in some ways a bit of an analysis, or at least this opportunity is a way to kind of analyze some of the conclusions, or at least some of your thoughts on the report. But yeah, Sylvia, could you tell us maybe 30 seconds? What do you do? Where do you come from?
Yeah, so I'm a researcher here at Bullish Exchange. So we're a centralized exchange that's regulated with also DEX characteristics, so an AMM plus central limit order book model. So we cover globally these main conferences. So we've done one for like Token 2049, we've done one for Paris Blockchain Week, Bitcoin Miami last year. So the Web3 Festival Hong Kong, Wanxiang and Hashkeys conference was, I would say, probably the hardest one that I've covered so far, because a lot of these sessions were actually in Chinese.
I figured.
Yes.
Yeah.
And translating language like ZK roll-ups or translating regulatory language into English real time was really hard. But thankfully we did have some help there.
So for that was that aside, because there were, let's put it in context as well. So there were three conferences kind of to some degree back to back, right? So it was FOMO Asia, Web3, and then Web3 Festival. And FOMO, from my understanding, was much more kind of local, Hong Kong. FOMO was that. And I think Web3 was much more mainland, and then the one in the middle was kind of a little bit more international. Would you agree or disagree on that?
Yeah, so I was at Paris Blockchain Week, so I didn't really cover the FOMO WOW Summit in Hong Kong, but I knew Hashkey Wanxiang conference was going to be a big one. It was previously held in Shanghai, and they brought it down to Hong Kong. So we heard word that a lot of key people were going to be there, and if you have a look at the agenda as well, there's a lot of great speakers and a lot of really good meat in those sessions that you could actually get substantial information out of versus some of other conferences where it's mainly kind of sponsorship speakers.
But and that's generally kind of the piece that I was hearing as well, because there were many side events that particular week. I think there were at least, I've heard numbers of 100 side events that particular week. Right? Yeah, I don't know if you went to any of them. I did, but I gave up.
Yeah, we went to like 4, 5 a night, just bouncing from Causeway Bay, Wan Central. They were everywhere. Hong Kong. It's definitely back.
I'm too old for that, so I didn't actually do that. I did once, but what I found interesting was, because I was like, okay, there's a lot of people, and I also had friends, mainland friends, that were actually at East Tokyo. So also what I noticed about the dynamic of things were some of the builders actually were in East Tokyo, or I won't say a lot, but I've just somewhere there. And then because the previous Web3 festival was in Shanghai, like this one was huge, because obviously crypto blockchain is allowed, not nice in mainland China. So a lot of them decided to come to Hong Kong. They really enjoyed it, because this is also a good place to host events and just have generally a good time.
Yeah, I think it was a place for exactly what Hong Kong was built for, which is East meets West, and a lot of international companies in the crypto space, like from the US, from Europe, Belgium as well, like different places congregated together in Hong Kong, and that was where that mainland crowd could also meet.
Right.
And that's where the two kind of intercepts. Yeah.
Was there on-site translation as well for the non-Chinese speaking guests?
They said that there was, but I
couldn't find it.
Couldn't get it. You know?
Usually, like I've been to like Korean conferences in Tokyo, so there's usually like a booth in the back, right?
Yeah.
With 2 or 3 like simultaneous translators, and they're usually pretty easy to find those units. So
No.
yeah,
I
if they're
think
not,
that the main stage as well, so it wasn't available for all the sessions. There were about like 4 stages
Got it. Okay.
that were happening concurrently. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so yeah, let's delve into the report a little bit. And so I'm gonna put a copy of the report from and link it to the website in the podcast itself. But I'm really interested, kind of generally, there's a lot of content, there's a lot of very technical issues as well, which is interesting. Generally, what is your sentiment based off of kind of being there, compiling the report? How is the sentiment reflecting upon Hong Kong, and also based off of what kind of Paul was saying? Obviously, and just a caveat, I used to work for the Hong Kong government as a consultant, so it's I do know Paul personally, but please be kind of authentic and direct. Like, what do you think of the general messaging from the Hong Kong government, from the SFC, from MA, and then reflecting on actually, the sentiment actually out of the conference?
Yeah, I think all in all, it's been very positive. And you can tell from the first 4 speakers, it was the Financial Secretary of Hong Kong, HKMA, SFC, and LETCO, which is the Legislative Council of Hong Kong. These are 4 very key figures in not just government, but also on the regulated front. And for them to all come out and carry the same tone throughout the whole conference, that sends a very strong message. And they emphasized one point, which was building Hong Kong as not just a Web3 hub of Asia, but of a Web3 hub of in the entire world. And it comes at an interesting time because you've got other regulators offshore in other countries that had a very hostile tone and a very
Just be direct. It's just the Americans. Yeah, come on. I used to be an American, so it's okay.
I didn't say it, but they did allude to that as well. So in these sessions, I think they know and they can see what the US is missing out on, and they don't want to be the one that carries the same tone. So they specifically said in the session that they were different in their approach, and they gave examples as well of how they're looking at regulating the sector, and implementing safeguard rails and having clarity for the industry is much more important than having zero regulation, which is what the US adopted, and then come after you after. That's definitely not the approach that they want to take. And post June, I think that's when the licensing regime comes out. I think that's where a lot of crypto companies are going to get a lot more clarity.
Right.
With Paul Chan, I think when he first opened the speech, he drew a comparison to Microsoft and Apple, and he said we were focused on computing and storage, and then later came fiber optics, like the advancement in fiber optics and the developments of your, say, applications and e-commerce, the proliferation of Taobao and the rest of these apps. And the only way that really happened was for the fundamentals to be built out first. And he was alluding to the fact that we are still really early, and in digital asset space, you need to build a strong fundamental and a strong infrastructure before you start proliferating these unicorns. And so he made that point, and I think I agree. It's in preparation of what's to come.
Right.
So
Interesting.
Interesting.
Um,
Um,
is there a bit of yeah, on my side there's a bit of that. Okay, so looking at the yeah, so Paul Chan, I think I saw the bit, and then I think you were referencing also and I've got sorry, I'm looking that way because I've got the right on
the
that side.
but
The
the
FCA
FC
moves DeFi activities to the same regulatory framework as traditional markets, same risks,
rest
same rules,
rules
and then there was also, yes, there was a reference to guardrails,
else.
offering guardrails, and that's really been the specific purpose of it. And was this the order actually that everyone was speaking on? It was Paul first,
First,
yeah,
it was
that
SFC,
was the order, yeah.
MA, and then yeah, LegCo.
And then let's go, yeah, yeah.
And then LegCo, because they're the lawmakers there. Did you know? I can see kind of Paul Chang, SFC, and MA kind of in the same too, right? Like consumer protection, guardrails, risk framework, that type of thing. On the LegCo side, was there anything significantly different? Because I also saw something about Biden administration, and it was a little more political.
I think he was less so hesitant in directly kind of drawing the line and saying that they were very different from the US, and he brought that up because he was saying that what the Biden administration came out of when they released that paper was going to be a hard kind of crackdown and look at into the digital asset space. And he told his friends that this was going to be a big deal, but they didn't believe him, so he was kind of reiterating that story. But the main message that I think that came out of that session was uh, very much in line with the previous three sessions of HMA, SFC, and Paul Chan, Financial Secretary. He he said also that funding for Cyberport was a huge initiative that they pushed,
Hmm.
and the budget that they approved was phenomenal.
It's
And
massive.
Massive.
Yeah.
he said that it was unprecedented. They didn't expect that they would be able to approve such a large amount. And he also likened being a world leader to
Hmm.
not just quantitatively measuring GDP per se, but how much demand for that country's currency there
Hmm.
is. I think this is a pretty important point to highlight because, you know, with dollar dominance, if we rewind back to 1944, Bretton Woods system, and why the USD was the global reserve currency, and then you fast forward into today's world where you've got geopolitical players in place and you've got almost a series of deglobalization and a, a group here of US,
Hmm.
Europe, you know, the Western world, and then you've got China, you've got
Hmm.
Russia. This kind of geopolitical dynamic really questions dollar dominance. And by him saying world leader is based off currency demand,
Hmm.
that kind of echoes what's coming out of China as well. You know, between Russia and China, they stopped pricing in USD for their oil contracts, and they've, I think, used yuan now
Yep. Yep. Yep.
for their contracts. Yeah,
Sylvia, I'm just gonna pause you 1 second.
sure.
Um, okay. Um, so yeah, sorry, just kind of there were some sound issues, but I guess on kind of bridging from what you were saying, before we get to the dollar dominance thing, there is this. I think you were referencing the leadership. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, the cyberport thing. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, the insight, because from a budgetary perspective, Science Park actually gets the lion's share of the budget. And so for them to really kind of highlight Cyberport, I know they're highlighting Cyberport on the development of Web3, But to kind of specifically target them or at least highlight them is kind of unusual. They never try to do that. Um,
Cyberport later came on stage and spoke after the chat.
ah,
So
that's why. In Science Park didn't attend, right?
uh, I didn't. I think they probably did. I didn't
They did.
attend that session.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. It could be that. And then to your latter point about this dollar dominance thing. Yes. So there have been. It's interesting that that was highlighted, and I think this was right after. I think the yuan. It was Saudi Arabia and Iran, was it? Oh, Syria. And then I think there was also the Brazilian. Um, yes. And so you're right. I have a theory that the push to crypto is actually an opportunity um, to. I'm going to choose my words carefully here. To not displace, but I think to make things competitive.
Yeah, to almost challenge dollar dominance.
I didn't want to actually use that word.
I mean,
Because yeah, I don't think it's possible to dislodge it, but I do. Maybe challenge is a good word.
I think there's there's been a real opportunity for the US, and I'm not sure if they've seen it, but crypto kind of gives the opportunity for the US dollar to cement dollar dominance as a global reserve currency, and that's by making dollars accessible and making dollars particularly reachable within certain regions, like in developing countries like in the Philippines or Indonesia or Thailand or wherever, not just Asia specific, but even in Africa. Wherever there is a severe case of inflation in the domestic currency where people might want to hold dollars, for an example, instead of
Mhm.
spending the paycheck straight away because of inflation, that poses a real advantage for the US to do that. But I'm unsure why the regulatory tone has come out the other way. But Hong Kong, I think definitely sees this as an opportunity. The HKMA, Clara Chan, she said in her session that the EHKD was also
Yeah.
being explored and hinted at a possibility for a private stablecoin to be launched in Hong Kong too.
Yes.
So the likes of your Circle, your Tether, but not a CBDC.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So kind of okay. Kind of geopolitics aside, let's go into the kind of thick of things. Out of all the sessions, I mean, so ZK proof is probably interesting, and that's kind of up and coming. There's a bit of CFI, there's a bit of DeFi, there's I think liquidity pools. Anything out of the individual sessions that really kind of stood out in terms of, I guess, speakers and or content?
I think outside of the regulator sessions, government sessions, there was a talk on real world assets. I think that's
Okay.
also heavily trending in the digital asset space. Talks of tokenization of T bills. There was a project on there that was doing that, and bonds. So making them again accessible to your everyday clientele,
Hmm.
and being able to pledge that as a to borrow against or to lend against. So pledging your assets in T bills or your bonds to be able to do that.
And this was who was the speaker there?
There was Jacob from Clipper. There was
DeFi challenges and real world opportunities.
that was from that's OpenAid and
Yep. Okay. That was day 2.
yes, I believe that was it.
Interesting. Okay. And then in the real this was the real world assets the real world assets suck. Okay.
Mm.
Interesting. And then in terms of real assets, you kind of mentioned kind of T-bills. Did they talk also about supply chain? Did they talk about yeah, I see. In TradeFi, do you know if you actually own that stock or T-bill? Did they talk about actually real land assets? And
That's
I have a follow-up question to that one, or a follow-up point. Reason why I'm asking.
I think land assets is it's if you say innovative in a way, I wouldn't really bask it as that. Uh, we've seen, I think 2 years ago there was a project that tokenized a Thailand resort,
Mm,
and I don't think much came out of that. Logistics, supply chain, Maersk, and IBM, they did a project where they tried to put on chain the whole logistic process of shipping
mm,
the industry. So from customs to port clearance, right through to liaising with the, I guess, the quarantine officials of
mm.
each country as well. Um, that didn't really take off. I think they shut that project down as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
When we're talking about real world asset tokenization, I think these financial assets do have some sort of place in displacing intermediaries, making it more accessible, as well as
Mm,
being able to solve for an actual problem.
mm,
Uh,
mm,
this is why Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan, SBI Holdings, they've also created their own platform like GS
mm,
for
mm.
Goldman. And then JPM and SBI, they've also got another project of theirs for tokenization of assets. I think this is why those bigger guys are coming into play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And
The reason
reason
why I kind of mentioned
is
it is I did an interview with King from head of fintech at InvestHK, and I was asking him also with the festival and the last couple of events and what kind of importance they play in Hong Kong. Um, and I kind of made the linkage because what is Hong Kong's role in the GBA, and what is Hong Kong's role as part of the GBA in regards to what we're doing here, right, with Web3. And he did kind of mention real world assets as well. And he didn't talk necessarily about real estate. But he did mention it, and he also mentioned the supply chain kind of bit as well. Um, and I haven't released this podcast yet, but I will. And I think basically it was interesting. He did, I think it wasn't anything specific, but he said Hong Kong has a role to play vis-a-vis GBA and in terms of crypto, in terms of blockchain, and we have to be very careful on how to involve that and how to deal with that because I think there is opportunity. This is kind of, I guess, Hong Kong's opportunity vis-a-vis everything else. Because if you ask me, anything else, what is Hong Kong's role, right? Vis-a-vis GBA. I mean, I guess it's a transportation hub. I guess it's a transit center. Um, to some degree, maybe a financial center as well. But a Web3 component, and more specifically, I think its interaction with real world assets in the GBA might be a pretty interesting opportunity. And you're right. I think you're good. You muted me, or oh,
Hmm?
now there's no echo. So what I'm gonna do is actually while you're speaking, I'm gonna mute myself. Maybe that would be better.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, yeah. I mean, tokenization of real world assets, from his view, I guess the GBA, which is the Greater Bay Area, involving mainland China and Hong Kong, that initiative's been pushed pretty pretty hard and pretty significantly by the government. You see the ads, you see a lot of the campaigns that's going around in Hong Kong with that, and I, there was an airline that was launched as well. I think that that also covers the transportation side of things. But when we're talking about real world assets in terms of financial instruments, I think that mainland China and Hong Kong is going to really draw a line there. and that's going to be more so because there's capital control in mainland, and that looks very different to what Hong Kong can do, because Hong Kong is there's a reason why it's a special administrative region,
Mm.
because it's a sandbox almost for the Chinese government to be able to play around and see what works, what hasn't, and also that bridge to the West and
Mm.
that bridge to capital flows
Mm.
is imperative. And
Mm.
to be able to do that, they've safeguarded mainland and assets there, capital
Mm.
there is within mainland.
Mm.
Hong Kong, that's got more flex, that's got
Mm.
more accessibility and the ability to be more malleable in the sense that they're able to try more things,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like these financial instruments and the tokenization of them.
Okay. Yeah, maybe it's Invest HK putting on their marketing hat and saying there's a little bit more opportunity because
Maybe,
I know. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, like maybe a CBDC that solves for cross-border transactions. That I could see happening, because right now, if you're in Hong Kong and you travel to Shenzhen for a day trip,
Mm. Mm.
um, yuan, you don't really carry cash on you because
Sure.
they're a very cashless society. And
Right.
WeChat Pay, Alipay, that's what you're supposed to be using. But there's WeChat Pay Hong Kong, Alipay
Mm.
Hong Kong, which is
Mm-hmm.
different. And it's still, I don't know why, after so
Mm.
many years,
Mm.
still not integrated yet. So
Right.
I can't use my Hong Kong dollars going over with my Hong Kong Alipay to pay
Mm.
for a cab ride or,
Mm.
um, you know, food.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be WeChat Pay China and
Right.
Pay China.
Yep.
So if it can solve for those cross-border issues, transaction issues, I think
Yeah.
that would be a thing.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I will actually. That's a good point. I will take this podcast and then actually I'll throw it back to King and see what he thinks. Yeah, he didn't mention CBDCs. Maybe it wasn't kind of top of mind. But I definitely see. I mean, like you kind of mentioned, right? Private. There's the EHKD effort, and there's also kind of a private stablecoin effort as well, right? Being pushed. So that certainly is kind of a thing. And then I actually, and just to put also context on CBDCs all across the region, I used to know the head of consensus in Asia, right? Charles
So,
Haas. Yeah. And so he was saying, I did ask him about CBC efforts all across Asia. Like, what are you guys doing? And obviously they consulted almost everybody. And he was saying, it's funny. He was saying that, oh yeah, Singapore makes a lot of noise, but they're behind on the effort. They said everyone's trying to pursue it. Japan, Korea, and they were saying that Hong Kong's actually much more ahead than they advertise, which
mhm.
I always found it kind of funny because Singapore likes to make a lot of noise. It's
Yeah,
good that you're not Singaporean. They make a lot of noise, but they in terms of execution, they're probably behind. Hong
yeah,
Kong tends not to make that much noise, but then usually they're pretty good with execution. So,
yeah. I mean, I think with CBDCs, the thing to note with that is the e-yuan, like the e-RMB, is being pushed quite heavily in China, the digital yuan.
yeah.
That and e-Hong Kong dollar, and there's various other countries. I think out of 194 countries in the world, over 100 are actually looking at CBDC projects.
Yeah, there was that map, right?
Sorry, there was
Yeah, there was that map, that CBDC map. Let me just.
yeah, there was one there was a report that was covered by, I think, Chainalysis as well. Um, I think there is a degree in which there are positives and negatives for CBDCs. The RBA, which is the Reserve Bank of Australia, they've also come out with their own pilot CBDC project,
Mm.
which is strictly limited to wholesale only.
Mm.
And I was in touch with a guy that was looking at the project down there, and he said that the reason why they're not rolling it out to retail is
Mm.
because things could turn quite dystopian very quickly.
Mm.
And I think it's also important to note there's many positives across implementing CBDCs, but also to which extent does it kind of turn, and that level of transparency that you have, and the data that you have shared with the the government, um, is that something that you want to hand over as well?
Got it. Okay. So I was gonna dig into dystopian and
Yeah,
what you meant by that. Okay.
yeah,
Got
yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope. We probably cannot discuss too much on here.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna. I get it. I get it. Say no more. Yeah, say no more. I mean, it's yes. I mean, that's kind of why I think there are certain countries pursuing CBDCs, right? Because of the fact that you can track more, you can kind of see where the inflows and the outflows, and we can also kind of using that lens figure out why certain countries are pursuing CBDCs quite aggressively, right? But on the other hand, you can also see you can also kind of make the argument that's probably better, right? In the sense that you can see kind of the inflows and the outflows because there are obviously a lot of gray areas using cash, right? Using dollars. So tracking, I think the
Yeah.
usage of that can also be a good thing.
I mean, it solves for many inefficiencies
Oh,
and
yes.
issues, and I think there are definitely a lot of positives. The the other side of things is that, if you've got monetary supply right now, monetary policy, sorry, is controlled in a certain way, and we've still got a Keynesian school of economic thought, um, with how we approach like fiscal and monetary policy,
Hmm.
and the money supply is generally controlled through the Fed and quantitative easing as well, and etc. Those kind of dynamics is going CBDCs will definitely affect that
Hmm.
and revolutionize the way we actually think about money. The economic school of thoughts as well would have to kind of update and change. Um,
I'm gonna
and
pause you there. I'm gonna dig that into a little bit. So I'm gonna put on my University of Chicago hat.
yeah,
Is but again, I studied undergrad in economics, so give me some rope. Um, so in terms of supply, right? So my understanding with CBDCs, at least when I watched the U.S. congressional panel on, I think it was CBDCs. Um, it was my understanding of the way that a lot of people, at least Americans, are thinking about implementation was that they would allow private CBDCs to happen, but then they basically it would be like a percentage of the float, the free float of the CBDCs had to be denominated in dollars. So, for example, if I don't know, there's 100 million of USDC floating around, 50% of the USDCs had to be in US dollar cash, and that had to be basically, yeah, Circle had to kind of maintain that kind of peg or that percentage. Things might have maybe I misinterpreted or things might have changed since then. And but the the idea was we still want dollar dominance, and it's funny that they kept on saying dollar dominance, right? Dollar dominance, dollar dominance, and so they wanted to keep dollar dominance. They wanted to make sure that we're still on the cap. How are you? Where do you see the ramifications of monetary, economic theory going forward? So basically, taking what you're saying and then just going a little bit deeper, where do you see things happening with CBDCs and pushing economic thought and thinking?
mhm. I think traditionally the way the Fed would influence monetary policy and the way they look at money supply, if you're able to embed certain logic
Mm,
into how each dollar is flowed through M1 base monetary supply, M1, M2, M3, and so forth,
yes.
then it gives you a lot more, I guess, flexibility to control where you want it to go, right?
Mm,
Right now, buying government bonds, etc., it benefits a certain percentage of the population, I would say like 60-70%. Over COVID period, if you had exposure to financial assets, you were somewhat a beneficiary of that. But if you were the bottom working class population where you had zero exposure to that and you saw none of that, but you're seeing extensive inflation in your everyday
Right.
grocery prices.
Right.
So is that fair?
Right.
I think yes, they can direct the money supply to a certain degree,
Yes.
and it gives them the flexibility to do that. And I think at the same time, there is some pushback from the implementation to a retail audience, because say I'm an obese person and I love eating McDonald's, and
I was gonna wonder where you're gonna go with that. Okay, got it. Okay.
and the government says, okay, you're putting a burden on the health system.
Yes.
I need to do something about you.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Okay.
I can almost code in
Yes.
what you're able to actually spend those dollars on.
I see.
You're not going to go to Hungry Jack's or McDonald's anymore.
Right.
No more Big Mac for you.
Right.
You're going on
Right.
salads now.
Right. Right. Right.
That's just in a really extreme case
Sure. Right.
in which we're kind of defining this space. But that's the kind of direction that it could very much go down.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it ceases to become just kind of monetary policy. It would also kind of bleed into
Everyday life.
everyday life. It will be kind of what do you call it? It's not community planning, city planning, healthcare. Right. There are healthcare ramifications and sociological kind of ramifications.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is one of the prime reasons why the RBA in Australia is not pushing it to a retail audience.
It's interesting, yeah, because I was actually kind of thinking the other way in a different country and what they could do there, and it's more about capital inflow and outflow. But here, you're saying that any country would have its own incentives to police, right? It could be inflow and outflow. It could be like, reducing the healthcare burden, right? Of the entire system, right? If I don't know Australia's healthcare system, but I believe it's probably like the UK where it's centralized. It's good, but it's centralized and it's national healthcare. So to reduce the burden, there are certain controls we can have, so that becomes monetary policy becomes more of a tool. We can use it. It's more powerful in day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean it will affect the way we look at the money
Yes.
supply.
Yes.
And
Yeah, I see
the way we operate.
Yeah.
Contractionary and expansionary monetary policy. It also gives up quite a lot of there's a slippery slope in
Yes, yeah. We don't have to go into details again. Yes.
Yeah.
But thank you for the McDonald's Big Mac.
Yeah.
I think I'd heard that example before, but I was like,
Okay.
it's always good to have
That's just what I'm
to have something visually. Is that what you're craving?
Yeah.
A Big Mac? You're an obese person inside, basically.
Exactly.
The inner obesity.
Living in this body.
Actually, how close is? I was gonna kind of follow up on the kind of topic of CBDC. It's like the digital yuan, right? Like, I mean, I think it was they did a pilot during COVID. No, I think they were like giving everybody stimulus checks via that.
It's rolled out in a few key cities actually. They've done a full rollout. They've done the test pilot project. It's in full force at the moment.
But do you know what's the usage? I mean, obviously, the statistics are damn statistics. But do you have a rough sense?
So far, right now, I remember they were rolling out in certain countries for like things like public transport, certain paying tax with. I think certain education centers were taking them as well.
Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. I do wonder about the take up. But kind of slightly off topic here. Any other kind of things that I think popped up in your head between day 1, day 2, day 3 of the conference?
Yeah, there was a talk from the uh one of the co-founders of Stacks, Mini. It
Okay.
was his session covered more of ordinals as well as so ordinal NFTs and how SegWit and Taproot upgrade really allowed the development community in
Mm,
Bitcoin
mm,
bypass the Bitcoin maximalists
mm,
to really give the Bitcoin chain a little bit more
mm,
flex to add on different applications outside of
mm.
just being held as an asset class.
Right.
So he expanded on the Taproot upgrade, and it was a very significant event. And when this event happened, I kind of flagged it as well, but I was quite surprised that there was not much take up because they increased the byte size. It was went from 1 megabyte to
Mm-hmm.
4 megabytes, which kind of allowed the attachment of things like media files, voice files, etc., onto per transaction per se,
Mm.
which is how NFTs are created on Ethereum.
Right.
And this really expanded the scope in which people saw how Bitcoin was in comparison to it being held as digital gold
Fulfilled.
per se.
Yep.
And he goes on to kind of expand on what Stacks does. I kind of filter out that information. So anything
Self-marketing. Yeah.
you'd find that the
Self-promoting.
report, a lot of the sessions that I cover will filter out any kind of product pictures or anything that is what I deem like marketing or noise. I
Mm.
just want the core of the either the technical knowledge or the regulation or something substantial that you have to contribute.
Mm.
Which is why sometimes some speakers you'd see have like kind of a lot shorter
90% marketing,
content.
10% messaging.
If you pitch, then
Right.
I remove you.
I think I know who you're talking
But
about.
yeah, so
Right.
he went on to kind of expand on how Stacks kind of caters for that, and they're an infrastructure stack that sits on top of Bitcoin. They're able to kind of be able to facilitate this next phase
Mm.
in which they believe that Bitcoin's heading towards, which is being able to kind of cater to more of the commercial side of things.
Okay.
These
Okay.
ordinals.
And just to kind of reflect and give some moment of reflection, the two that I think you referenced, this one and the real world assets talk, do you think those are the ones that you enjoyed, or do you think generally just reading the room, it was also like people were also very interested in it, reading the room meaning like well attended, people were clapping. I don't know if that's the thing that happens
Mm.
in Chinese conferences, like Apple conferences, right? Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
Ordinals, yeah. Like I know that doesn't happen, but like
Yeah.
reading the room for people that weren't in the room.
Uh, okay, I'm gonna have to note that if the conference organizers are watching this, please remove people that speak on their phone in these sessions
Oh really?
because
Ooh.
this was a constant battle. It was an
Oh
up.
geez. Right.
Um, yeah, you have outliers that I just like that. So during that session, I was hearing a lot more on what Xiao Hong wanted to eat for dinner,
Okay.
other than what they had to say about reward assets. But from what I could capture, I think these speakers had quite an in-depth understanding and insight into
Mm,
what they were building themselves. Each of them had their own kind of projects or companies that they were working for.
mm,
The room, I would say, in comparison to something like Paris Blockchain Week, I think there people probably understood a little bit more because there was more commotion after certain comments,
right.
versus here when all I could hear was just people are either on the phones or just some chatter in the
Mm,
background.
mm,
I think they had less to appreciate for. over here.
Fair enough.
Versus
There's more things to eat here, I guess, in Hong Kong.
yeah, I guess so.
Well,
But yeah, the in Europe, I guess the audience there were much more engaged, and I think the type of people that were attending that conference was also priced out because the conference tickets were quite hefty, and,
right. Oh,
and
I
so
see.
that meant that you were there to actually learn and engage, and
Got it.
yeah,
Got it. What are the prices here, actually?
I think they're about like 2,000 or 3,000 Hong Kong dollars for early bird, and then it went up to like 4,000 or so.
Oh, okay. But there was a
Not
code.
cheap,
Yeah.
definitely cheap,
Right.
but still, yeah, there were, yeah. I mean, sometimes you wish people that attended the sessions would try and make the most out of their money to actually come and listen. But
I
hey, that's
mean,
how
not.
we do these reports, right?
Yeah, not to be jaded. Yeah, but I do. Someone did kind of give me the feedback that this was, this was a lot of BD people kind of were going to show up here, and that this was primarily a conference for kind of networking for mainland kind of thought leadership and people to gather in Hong Kong was a great place to gather.
Mm,
So
mm.
that's I guess to some degree that's a pity, and to some degree I think that's a good thing, right?
Yeah,
To
yeah. I think it was
gather people.
it was good. The overall sentiment, I think, was so positive.
Mm,
I don't even think Hong Kong FinTech Week last year. I would say it was still a little bit not there, not
okay.
right yet.
Oh, you were there. Okay.
Yeah, I was there, and compared to Token 2049, because it was Token 2049 and then Hong Kong FinTech Week.
True. Yeah, that's right. That's right. On the
So
Hong Kong side, they're like these bastards. They got it like it was like right before. It was the same week. I think it was the
it
same.
was no, no, no. Token 2049 was in September. Hong Kong FinTech was November. So it was very
That was okay.
quite close in time.
Yes. Yeah.
Or you mean Singapore FinTech Week? Maybe that was the same week.
Yes, it was the
Yeah,
same. Yes, and yes, they were like bastards.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
trying to compete.
That was that difference. Yeah, but I think the it was like Singapore was so hyped
Mm,
back in September, Token 2049. It was crazy. There was so many people there. It was like the talk of town.
right.
And then came Hong Kong FinTech Week, and
Right.
then it was like, oh, okay, it's kind of nice that there was some positive tone coming out of there, but still no real
Mm,
clarity on regulation, still no real clarity on how this sector is going
mm,
to be um, innovating within Hong Kong.
right.
And then come now, which was April,
Right.
this Web3 festival, now we've got a very clear idea. Now we
Right.
know that the government, the regulators are actually serious about pushing this kind of initiative,
Mm,
about setting Hong Kong up as a digital asset hub. We know that. That's very clear. And that in turn has also driven a lot of the commotion around, and
mm,
a lot of people getting together, a lot of talks, a lot of deals being made, and the floor was really busy. It
mm,
was very hard to travel from one stage to the next because there were so many people. It was like a
right.
sea of people.
Right.
That was actually really good to see. I think it's very positive in the sense that we're also hearing a lot of interest from Singapore, some US based customers. Um, so some people are looking to actually possibly relocate their headquarters
Okay.
into Hong
Okay.
Kong off
Wow.
the back of
Okay.
this.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And to do you remember who were the speakers? Who were the government speakers from FinTech Week?
Oh,
It wasn't Paul, was it?
I can't recall. I didn't cover that one.
Okay.
I
Don't think
went
it was.
to, I think, one or two sessions for that one, but it was organized by Finoverse, I think.
It was. It was.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, Paul was here, open remarks and opening keynote. Okay. No, I think it
Mhm.
was similar as
I
well.
think there was some government personnel that was there. I remember the session was actually positive,
Right.
but it wasn't nearly as strong as what came out of Web3 Fest.
Right.
Web3
Interesting.
Fest, they just lined up one after the other. It's like you couldn't get a more assertive tone than that.
Interesting. Now, maybe it's different context as well. I think maybe we were, because I helped to some events. I think right around FinTech Week. I think it was. It must have been around. Yeah, it was around Hong Kong FinTech Week, and the context was, I think, even a week or 2 weeks before, we weren't sure about the rules on masking and dinner. So, for example, I did one of the official side events. So we hosted, yeah, some of the speakers on a dinner at Asia Society, and so even then we weren't quite sure whether we were like on or not. So I think there perhaps was some pause as well.
Mm.
Um,
Oh
on
yes,
the
COVID was a
yeah,
thing back then as well.
yeah, it was a thing back then. But that doesn't explain, I think, the general kind of government tone, because I think that would be fairly consistent. But having said that, maybe they're like, okay, we're open for sure. This one, Web3 Festival, we're open for sure. We're gonna go, all guns blazing. Back then, it was like, yeah, we're not sure yet, so let's not be totally open, right? Because we just
Mm.
don't know. So maybe there's some of that. So I'll let you have the final word, because you do have your Big Mac to get to. The general sentiment positive. Come June 1st and beyond, what any projections? Any predictions?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more. Well, with this licensing regime coming out,
Mm,
I think once the banking rails are being solved for, so
mm,
fiat off ramp on ramp for crypto companies, that would be a very big call to other offshore companies that are
mm,
interested in still operating in this space
mm,
and solving for what's being shut down in the US with
mm-hmm.
certificate and signature.
Yes.
That's one of the biggest problems that we have to actually tackle as an industry. And come that time, I think you'll start seeing a lot of headlines coming out with
Mm,
companies saying we're moving headquarters to Hong Kong, or X and X are hiring more headcount for Hong Kong. Marketing, for an example, is going to be probably a big thing as well, because they
mm,
can suddenly legally have a framework on
mm,
how they can distribute information and market to retail investors. Um, that kind of clarity is really
mm,
important for the industry,
mm,
and particularly clarity on how certain assets are going to be
mm.
regulated. DeFi was one
Mm.
that they did mention.
I saw that. Yeah.
Rather than taking a blanket approach, I think they wanted to make sure that they weren't going to kill innovation. At the same
Mm.
time, they wanted to protect investors, which is very positive.
Yeah.
Um, Not a blanket approach, but a case by case kind of basis. They're going to look at the tokenomics and the governance side of things, of how is this protocol actually fully decentralized? If there's
Right.
three key addresses that hold all the
Sure.
token